All right, so the latest PCE report has just been released, and that stands for personal consumption expenditures, i.e. the price of goods and services, and just tracking that over time. And so, as it turns out, the price of goods and services in general, excluding energy and food, are up 2.8% year over year. If you add in energy and food, as you can imagine, that number is likely a lot higher, than that's being reported. And so, what this ultimately means is that the price of everything really is continuing to go up, and it is not getting cheaper, right? However, in spite of that, though, it does look like we're still looking at another rate cut at the Fed meeting in a few days or so on December 10th. And ultimately, what this tells me is that just the stubborn inflation will continue. And the Fed right now seems to be more so concerned about ongoing job losses rather than taming inflation, right? But it's also interesting because when you look at the objective they're trying to achieve, which is, maximum unemployment and price stability, we're kind of entering a case where these two objectives now are kind of like working against each other, and so it's going to be very interesting to see what direction we wind up going in. And so I think this upcoming Fed meeting is going to be quite telling, especially when we get an idea of like, how many governors voted for a cut, how many, objected, right, to a cut. And also just, on a more nationwide level, right? Just the idea of affordability really starting to enter the conversation, right? Just everyday affordability, just for everyday Americans, right? Because ultimately, if this inflation isn't handled and we don't find a way to get it back to this 2% target, then that ultimately means that, we're either going to try to outgrow this inflation, right? By helping, incomes exceed, right, that number. And who knows if that's going to happen now with AI, right? That's a big question mark, right? Or we ultimately start to jack up interest rates again to get that number down, or we just accept it. In either case, I just see the price of everything continuing to go up. And so in light of that, do what you can to look after yourself, invest, do what you can to, just keep your net worth pacing along with this. And that way you're ultimately not falling behind, even though at the end of the day, if the country keeps spending money we don't have, the dollar winds up becoming worth less anyway. So yeah, just my thoughts for today. And we'll see what happens on December 10th. All right, peace.